We live in a time of fashion forwardness. It is a time of which one can walk down the streets and see styles of all different sorts, some new, some from previous decades, some unique, some timeless, some may consider basic, and etc. Unlike past decades, style is different everywhere one goes. Not long ago, women did not have these equal rights. It was unacceptable for a man to dress feminine-like and vice versa. It wasn't until recent decades that people in the U.S. gained these rights through our ancestors fighting for them to no end. I want people to understand what people went through for us to have these freedoms, not only to appreciate fashion today, but to give people motivation to work for what they want in life, and not just sit back expecting change to happen without even lifting a finger. There are still so many places in the world that do not have these privileges and live under strict dress codes with unequal rights. Americans need to be more appreciative of what we have now and what our ancestors have worked for. Icons such as Rosie the Riveter and Coco Chanel are two women who are looked up to in the fashion world. They created breakthroughs and brought about change in their time, and are part of the reason why women are able to dress the way we can today. Here's a little more about them. Famous fashion designer Coco Chanel made her mark on the world in 1910 when she came out with her first clothing shop. She is known to be one of the most important feminists of all time, as she not only transformed the culture of women's clothing, but was also an extremely savvy businesswoman, especially for that time, whose business still dominates the fashion world today.
Coco Chanel was Time magazine's only fashion designer to top its 100 most important people of the century.
She truly is an incredible trailblazer.
She came from nothing and built an empire.
The fashion of Coco Chanel has stood the test of time.
Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel was born in Saumur, France on August 19, 1883. As Coco Chanel, she revolutionized women's fashion. But as a young woman, Chanel struggled with a dark childhood.
Coco Chanel grew up in a convent, an orphanage, and that was where she learned how to sew. Her mother had died, and her father basically abandoned Chanel and her two sisters.
She got the name Coco because she performed in cabarets and was given sort of that term of endearment. Coco Chanel was a true party girl.
Chanel became the mistress of Englishman Arthur Boy Capel and was able to finance her first Paris hat shop in 1910. But it was on vacation in Deauville where a simple reinvention of her lover's jersey shirt changed the world of fashion.
At the time, women were trapped in corsets, and fashion was restrictive for women. They couldn't eat, they couldn't breathe. Coco Chanel changed all of that. She looked at it and said, this isn't how a modern woman should dress. This is how men dress us.
She introduced things like collared shirts with ties for women and boater hats, things that had previously been part of the male wardrobe.
Chanel continued to create new innovations, introducing the legendary little black dress in 1926, and was the first designer to ever lend her name to a fragrance.
Chanel No. 5 opened up this whole new channel of business for luxury fashion, and now a lot of the money that luxury fashion labels make is from fragrance and cosmetics.
The little black dress is so incredibly revolutionary. To this day, it's the thing that we go to in our closet.
Some of Chanel's trademark designs include the striped sailor shirt, the quilted Chanel purse, the two-tone Chanel pump, and the Chanel suit, of course.
In 1939, World War II caused Chanel to close her shops. But the end of the war saw her triumphant comeback to the fashion world, rebuilding a dynasty that lives on today through designer Karl Lagerfeld.
The reason Coco Chanel is still so compelling 40 years after her death is that she refused to follow trends. As a result, her work has never dated.
The year of 1939 marks the start of World War II. This time period, known as the New Era, was vital to the uproar in women's rights. Women were taking stands all over the U.S. and focusing on their rights. Rosie the Riveter played a major part in this movement, as she was the icon for stronger and more independent women of the time.
She starred in a famous World War II-era propaganda campaign and eventually became one of the most famous icons in American history. But who exactly was Rosie the Riveter? And what's the real story behind her well-known image? To start with, it's not really about a riveter named Rosie. It's not even about one woman, but about millions. After the United States entered World War II in late 1941, government and industrial leaders called on American women to join the workforce in order to replace manpower lost when men enlisted as soldiers. Some 6 million would answer that call. Between 1940 and 1945, the female demographic of the national workforce increased from 27% to nearly 37%. Half of these working women took on tough jobs in defense industries.
Rosie the Riveter was an inspiration to women across America. People saw her as the symbol for women's rights and equality. Her image first pushed women towards fighting for their equality in the workforce and led to the further push for equality in all parts of society. Rosie's image is still prevalent in today's society as people compare her to strong and recognized feminists today. This is represented in these pictures.
Rosie the Riveter was bigger than just one woman. She was a symbol of the wartime work and sacrifice of millions. Though Rockwell's painting was the original depiction of Rosie, she is most widely identified with a different image. In 1942, the year before the Rosie song was released, the Westinghouse Power Company commissioned J. Howard Miller to create a promotional poster that would boost morale among its employees. The now famous poster featured a bandana-clad woman flexing her arm muscles under the slogan, "We can do it." Due to copyright restrictions on Rockwell's work, Miller's "We Can Do It" poster was adopted by the feminist movement of the 1980s as a modern symbol of female empowerment. It is now the image most commonly associated with Rosie. From wartime propaganda to feminist symbol, Rosie has remained a riveting icon in American history.
Women began wearing shoulder pads in their clothes to appear bigger and have broader shoulders like their male peers. Shoulder pads originally became popular for women in the 1930s when fashion designer Elsa Schiaparelli included them in her designs in 1931, and the following year Joan Crawford wore them in the film Letty Linton. This picture of Joan Crawford taken in the 1940s displays her posing with a shoulder-padded dress. The author of this article, Francesca Rice, wrote in the caption, "Power dressing at its very best." Women's rights in fashion have come a long way in history. Women are now free to express themselves and are seen as equals in society. Women in other countries aren't so lucky. Americans often don't appreciate how far we've come in America because women in other countries experience an abundance of inequality. Many of us have heard of the show Fashion Police. But many don't know that there are literal fashion police in some foreign countries. France holds a burqa ban, where women will be arrested for wearing their burqas in public despite the fact that they must wear one for their religion. Saudi Arabia holds a ban on bare skin and cross-dressing. Most of the rules are primarily against women, and these laws show that sexism is still alive and strong in many places. The clothes people choose to wear are an underestimated privilege here in America. We have the right to dress as we please, a right that has been earned over history, and one that should be admired and appreciated much more than it is. We live in a time in which natural freedoms are finally being respected in the U.S., and Americans, especially younger generations, must realize that what we have is special, something to cherish and own as individuals.